My name is Marielle Vaughn. I've always thought of myself as someone who keeps the peace. Quiet, reliable, the kind of person who doesn't cause trouble, especially not in her own family. But looking back, I wonder if being the one who never asked for much meant no one ever really saw me. Something happened not long ago that shook all of that loose, made me question what love, respect, and family really mean, and where I fit in all of it. Stay with me until the end. Then tell me in the comments, did I do the right thing, or was there another way? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. I still remember that Monday afternoon, like it just happened. Gray skies hanging low over Bellingford, a soft drizzle tapping on my windshield as I pulled into Harbor Lane Estates. I'd just returned from a 3-week work trip to Portland. Nothing dramatic, just numbers and reports at a client's headquarters. I was tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. I was craving silence, the kind that only your own space can give you. As I walked up the steps to my condo, I entered the code on the keypad like I'd done 100 times. The door clicked open, and something felt wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet wrong, like walking into a room where someone was just whispering about you. It hit me the moment I stepped inside. The smell was the first thing. Vanilla something, fake and overpowering, not the soft lavender I always used. Then came the silence. Not the comforting, familiar hush of home. A hollow kind. Cold. I looked around and couldn't recognize the place. The couch I'd bought secondhand and loved like a pet? Gone. The coffee table I'd refinished with my own hands during lockdown? Gone. My framed photo of Mount Hood, the one that reminded me to breathe when life got too loud? Gone. Even the little cactus that sat by the window. It was like it had never existed. I walked deeper in, slowly, like I was trespassing in my own life. The hallway was bare. No coats, no shoes by the door. The bookshelf was empty. Every trace of my presence had been erased. My chest tightened. I moved toward the bedroom, heart pounding now, hoping, somehow, that maybe this was all a misunderstanding, maybe something explainable. But then I saw her, Brielle, sitting on what used to be my bed. My younger sister, hair pulled back in a messy bun, scrolling on her phone like she'd been living there for weeks. She didn't even look surprised. "Oh, hey," she said casually, like she'd bumped into me at the grocery store. "Didn't know you were coming back today." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I stood there, frozen, as if my body hadn't caught up with the moment yet. Then came the sound of a pan clinking from the kitchen. I turned my head, and there she was. My mother, Delora Vaughn, in my kitchen, wearing an apron, flipping something on a skillet like this was Sunday brunch. She looked at me, looked through me, really, and smiled. "We thought you'd be back tomorrow." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my fingers tingled. "Where's my stuff?" I finally managed, my voice dry, almost unfamiliar. She turned off the burner, wiped her hands on the apron, and said, as calmly as if she were discussing the weather, "I put most of it in storage. Some things I gave away. Brielle needed a place to stay. Her divorce has been hard." The room started spinning. My knees buckled slightly, but I kept standing. "You... what?" She sighed, like I was being dramatic. "This place is too much space for just one person. You're barely ever here." I thought, well, I thought we could treat it like family property. What's yours is hers too. I stared at her. Her face was composed, confident, almost proud of her own logic. "My name is on the deed," I whispered. "I know," she replied, "but still, it's family." And just like that, something cracked. It wasn't loud. It didn't shatter. But it shifted something inside me that had been still for decades. It was like someone peeled back the wallpaper of politeness, and I finally saw the mold underneath. I didn't argue, didn't yell. I just stood there, watching the two of them carry on like I'd dropped by uninvited. I don't know how long I stood there, but I know this much. When my mother turned her back to me without an ounce of guilt, and my sister went back to her phone like I was a stranger in her new room, something in me decided I wasn't going back. Not to who I was. Not to the way things were. I didn't go back to the condo that night. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, past the library, the park, even down to the riverfront where I used to walk on weekends. My mind was loud in a way that felt foreign. For someone like me, quiet, steady, always thinking ahead, this kind of raw, messy feeling had no place to land. What was I supposed to say? What was I supposed to feel? There was a part of me, the old part, that whispered, "It's just stuff, Muriel. Let it go. She's your sister." That voice had always been there, trained into me since childhood, like a second conscience. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. Be the bigger person. But then there was the other part. Louder now, angrier, hot and sharp. They erased you. They erased you from your own life and called it love. I parked outside the Cedar and Steam Cafe the next morning, even before it opened. I knew Colette would be there early. She always was. Her routines were like clockwork, one of the things I admired about her. Predictability was comforting when everything else felt like sand slipping through my fingers. When I walked in, she raised her eyebrows, surprised. I must have looked like hell. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded, sitting down heavily across from her in the corner booth. She didn't ask anything right away. Just poured my cup, slid it over, and waited. After a long sip, I finally said, "They cleared out my condo. Everything, my furniture, my photos, gone." She blinked. "Who?" "My mother, my sister. They moved Brielle in while I was gone." I swallowed. Like it wasn't even mine. Colette didn't gasp, didn't curse, just looked at me with that calm, steady expression of hers. "How long have they had the key?" "Years. Mom's had it since I bought the place." She stirred her coffee slowly. "Did they ask?" "No." "Did you say they could?" I shook my head. "Not really. I didn't say they couldn't." Colette leaned back, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "There are doors," she said quietly, "that if you don't close them, people will keep walking in like they own the place." I felt the truth of that settle into my chest like a stone. I stayed at a motel that night. The room was musty, the sheets scratchy, but it felt more mine than my own condo. I lay awake thinking about everything. My mother's voice, so casual, Brielle's indifference, and the way I stood there, silent, like a guest in my own story. I couldn't sleep, so around 2 a.m., I drove back to the condo. I needed to see it again, not through shock this time, but with clear eyes. They were asleep. The lights were off. I didn't go inside. I just stood outside the door for a long while, hand hovering over the keypad but never pressing it. The next day, I checked my mailbox. A few pieces of junk mail, a bill, and something else, a receipt. It was from a local storage unit. I opened the envelope, confused at first, until I saw the name. Delora Vaughn. The receipt was dated 2 weeks ago. The unit had been rented in her name, paid for in advance for 6 months. Tucked inside was another folded document, a copy of a moving company invoice. Same date, same name, same intent. My hands trembled as I read. This wasn't some last-minute desperate act of kindness toward Brielle. It was planned, premeditated, executed, without me, without even a phone call. I sank into my car, staring at the papers in my lap. Suddenly, the air felt heavier. My ears rang. All my life, I believed I had a place in my family. Not always a loud voice, but a place. A corner of safety earned by good behavior, by being the one who never asked for too much. But now, I realized that corner only existed if I stayed useful. Quiet, willing. They didn't forget I existed. They just assumed I wouldn't mind disappearing for a little while. I sat there until my coffee from earlier went cold in the cup holder. The sky outside had turned a pale, indifferent gray. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was entitlement. and I wasn't sure which part hurt more. The next time I walked into the condo, I told myself I'd stay calm. I needed answers, not just to understand what had happened, but to remind myself it actually had, that I hadn't imagined it, that the life I had built so carefully, every object, every quiet decision, had truly been taken apart while I wasn't looking. Delora was folding laundry on the couch when I stepped in. Brielle wasn't there, just the two of us, surrounded by throw pillows I didn't recognize, a new rug I'd never seen, and curtains that felt like they belonged in someone else's story. She didn't look up. "Mom?" I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Can we talk?" She glanced over, still folding. "If it's about the apartment, I already explained." I sat down in the chair across from her, one of the only pieces of furniture left from before. "You didn't explain. You told me you made a decision, one that didn't include me." She finally looked at me. Her face was unreadable, tired maybe, but not sorry. "You have a good job, Marielle. You're doing fine. Brielle needed help." "That's not the point," I said. "You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me. You just acted. Like my space, my things, didn't matter." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not. I'm trying to understand how you thought this was okay." She dropped a towel on her lap and sighed. "Because you have everything. A career, stability. She has nothing. Her husband cheated, left her with debt and no place to go. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't help her?" I stared at her. "You could have helped her without taking from me." "She's your sister." "She's not entitled to my home. She's family." I paused, swallowing the heat rising in my throat. Then, carefully, I asked, "Why didn't you at least talk to me first?" She looked at me, long and hard, and then she said it. "Because I'm your mother. I brought you into this world. I don't need permission to do what's best for my family." There it was, the thing I'd always felt but never heard out loud. I sat very still. That sentence rang through my bones like a bell. Not loud, but heavy, final. It didn't matter that I was a grown woman, that I paid the mortgage, filed the taxes, scrubbed the sinks. In her eyes, none of that outweighed the one fact she clung to. She gave birth to me, and because of that, she believed she had the right to step into my world, rearrange it, and call it hers too. I didn't argue anymore. I just got up and left. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys in the stairwell. The next day, I went back to the storage unit, determined to retrieve what was left of my things. If I couldn't have peace, maybe I could at least have my own belongings. The manager was kind, helped me open the unit, gave me a dolly, didn't ask too many questions. At first glance, it looked like most of my stuff was there. A few boxes labeled kitchen, a lamp, a couple of my throw blankets. But the more I dug, the more it became clear. This was a curated version of my life. Sanitized. Incomplete. My journals were missing. So were the photo albums from college, the painting I'd done at 31 during that art class I never told anyone about. My dad's old flannel shirt I kept in the back of the closet, gone. I searched every box. Nothing. I called Delora, straight to voicemail. So I texted, "Where are the rest of my things? My personal stuff, photos, journals, the painting from the hallway?" An hour later, her reply came. "Some of that was damaged. I threw out what didn't look useful. You don't need to hang on to every old memory, Marielle." Useful. She threw away the pieces of me that didn't serve a function. As if my memories, my past, my private thoughts, were clutter to be managed. I sat down on the edge of the unit floor, surrounded by boxes that didn't feel like mine anymore, and cried. Quietly. Not like in the movies. No screaming, just slow tears, hot on my cheeks, rolling down into the collar of my coat. It wasn't just about the stuff. It was about being erased, not physically, but emotionally, intentionally. My mother hadn't just rearranged furniture. She had edited me out of my own life. and I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, she believed that was her right. That thought stayed with me long after I closed the storage unit door. I met Colette again a few days later, same booth, same time of morning. She had already ordered for both of us, black coffee for her, oat milk latte for me, no sugar. I was still reeling from what I'd found missing. The journals, the painting, the careless way my mother had explained it all away. It gnawed at me, like a loose thread I couldn't stop pulling. Colette listened quietly while I talked, her eyes never leaving mine. Then, somewhere between my second sip and her third, she leaned back and said, almost too casually, "You know you could report it." I blinked. Report what? What they did. The property's in your name, right? I nodded slowly. Then it's a break-in. Unauthorized entry. At the very least, a civil violation. You don't have to roll over, Marielle. The idea hit me like cold water. Not because I hadn't thought about it, I had, but because someone else had said it out loud. Put it on the table like it was an actual, real option. I can't call the police on my mother, I said, voice lower than I intended. Colette raised an eyebrow. Why not? I opened my mouth, but the answer didn't come. Not right away, not clearly. I don't know, I said, because she's my mother. Because we're supposed to figure it out, keep it in the family. She didn't push, just stirred her coffee. Then, gently, sometimes the family needs to be reminded they're not above the law, especially when they think love means possession. That word, possession, stuck in my chest, like a truth I'd been circling without naming. I didn't decide anything that day. I left the cafe still caught between instinct and impulse, shame and anger, memory and fact. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for a long time. It was one of the only things they hadn't replaced. A narrow glass, chipped on the bottom left, hung slightly crooked on the wall. I stared at my reflection and barely recognized her. My face looked drawn, my eyes dull. There was a weight to my shoulders that hadn't always been there. I touched my cheek, as if trying to remember what it used to feel like before this hollow settled in. Then I saw it. Not in my eyes, but behind them. The silence. That old silence. The kind I learned young, sitting at the dinner table when my mother snapped at my father and everyone pretended nothing had happened. The kind I carried through every holiday, every family gathering, every phone call where I swallowed my hurt because she meant well. The silence I thought was strength, but now it just felt like surrender. I sat on the edge of the tub and let the thoughts come. How many times had I stepped aside so someone else could feel comfortable? How many times had I handed over pieces of myself in exchange for peace? I wasn't sure what doing something would look like, but I was suddenly deeply sure of what doing nothing meant. It meant disappearing. The next morning, I didn't go to work right away. Instead, I went to the office early and sat in the break room with my laptop. I opened a search tab. Oregon tenant property rights. Unauthorized use of residential property. Can I press charges if my family took over my house? The answers weren't clear-cut. Legal stuff never is. But one thing came up again and again. If your name's on the deed and someone moved in or changed locks or removed property without your consent, it's considered unlawful. Civil trespassing, possibly criminal. I took a deep breath. Then I did something that surprised even me. I emailed Hannah from our legal department. I just said I had a personal situation and needed to understand my rights as a homeowner. She wrote back within the hour, kind and careful. Told me what I already knew, deep down. That I had a case. That it was my decision whether to pursue it. And that she could connect me with someone if I needed legal advice. I stared at her email for a long time. The words didn't feel real. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were simple, factual. Like all the emotions I'd been drowning in didn't change the truth. I was allowed to protect what was mine. I walked outside after work, the wind sharp on my cheeks. My coat flapped open, and I didn't bother fixing it. I wasn't ready to act. Not yet. But I was no longer willing to pretend that silence was safer. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to be seen. And if that meant being the bad daughter for the first time in my life, maybe that was a price I was finally willing to pay. Sleep stopped visiting me. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling fan, turning slowly above me, shadows bending and stretching across the walls. My mind wouldn't stop running circles around itself. What kind of daughter reports her own mother? That question echoed louder than any other. I'd been raised to believe that family came first, that a good daughter kept things inside, worked things out privately, never caused a scene. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that condo. Empty. Gutted. A hollowed-out version of the life I'd built. And it wasn't just the missing couch or the photo albums. It was the feeling. Like I'd been robbed without a sound. Like I didn't exist unless they needed something from me. I started walking more. Long loops around the neighborhood before sunrise, when the streets were still quiet and the air bit at my cheeks. I needed the movement. Needed to burn off the energy that had nowhere to land. One morning, as I sipped coffee from a paper cup on a bench outside the post office, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Marielle? It was Aunt Lois, my mother's older sister. Hi, I said cautiously. Everything okay? She paused, then launched right in. Your mother called me, said you're trying to press charges, that you reported her to the police? I froze. I didn't. Not yet, I said, instantly on the defensive. But she, Mom and Brielle, moved into my place without asking. Took my things, gave some away, threw others out. They replaced my life with hers. She said you're kicking them out, Lois continued, her tone clipped. That Brielle's homeless, and you don't care. I swallowed hard. The old shame tried to crawl up my throat. I do care, I said. But I also have boundaries. Or at least I'm trying to. Lois sighed. Families go through things, Marielle. This isn't something we take to the police. It's something we talk through. I tried, I said, sharper than I meant to. I really did. She went quiet after that. Then mumbled something about praying for clarity and hung up. And just like that, I knew the story had spread. It wasn't just between us anymore. My mother had taken it public, calling relatives, talking to neighbors, maybe even telling the women at her church group, painting me as the cold, heartless daughter who wouldn't lift a finger for her sister, the career woman who'd forgotten what family meant. The calls kept coming, some from numbers I didn't answer, one voicemail from a second cousin I hadn't seen in years. I don't know what's going on, but you might want to remember who's always been there for you. And yet, had they been? I sat with that question longer than I expected. Because when you grow up thinking love looks like sacrifice, you stop noticing the moments it doesn't show up. I had been there. For everyone. For every birthday. Every emergency. Every guilt-laced favor. I'd been the good daughter, the steady one, the one who never asked for anything in return. But now, when I needed someone to say, that wasn't right. What they did was wrong. The silence was deafening. Except from Colette. She came by that evening with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on the floor of the half-empty condo, eating spring rolls straight from the box. They're turning it into a morality play, I said. And I'm the villain. Colette chewed for a moment, then wiped her fingers on a napkin. Let them. I looked at her. Let them, she repeated. If their version of you needs to be the bad guy for them to sleep at night, that's their story to carry, not yours. But it still hurts, I said. It still matters. Of course it does, she nodded. But so does your peace. So does your name. So does your space. I didn't say anything for a while. Just listened to the heater hum and the wind rattle softly against the windows. That night, lying in bed again, wide awake, I finally put it into words. I don't know who I am in this family anymore. A daughter? A scapegoat? An extra room they can borrow when they need to start over? What I did know, what I was starting to know, is that I couldn't be the thing they needed me to be if it meant disappearing every time they stepped closer. And if they were going to call me ungrateful, cold, or selfish, maybe it was time I stopped being so afraid of those words, because what they were really saying was, "You stopped letting us take from you." And they were right. I had. Or at least, I was finally starting to. It happened on a Tuesday. Cold air, slate gray skies, the kind of morning where everything feels suspended. I was sitting with Colette in her backyard, our mugs steaming between us. She had just finished telling me the final chapter of her divorce, the part she rarely shared. How her ex drained their joint savings behind her back. How she kept quiet for years, thinking silence was the price for being loyal. Then she looked at me, dead in the eye, and said, "Love without boundaries isn't love, Marielle. It's just slow suicide with prettier language." That sentence stuck to my ribs. We didn't talk much after that. I went home, stood by the kitchen sink for what felt like hours, and watched the clouds roll past the window like a slow-moving freight train. Then I got in my car. The police station in Bellingford is small, one story, plain brick, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I went in. The officer at the desk was kind, listened carefully, asked if I had proof the condo was solely in my name. I did. She asked what had been removed, what had been replaced, if I ever gave written or verbal permission. "I never gave consent," I said quietly. "They didn't ask. They just took over." I filled out the paperwork with shaking hands. Then I filed a civil eviction notice. I gave my mother and sister 7 days to vacate. No negotiation. No more half-truths or soft landings. It was done. That night, I slept. Not well, but better than I had in weeks. By the next morning, the first wave hit. My phone lit up with a call from a number I knew too well. I hesitated. Then I answered. Delora didn't say hello. "You really did it," she snapped. "You filed paperwork. You're dragging your own family into court." I stayed silent. "Do you know what this looks like? Do you even care? People are going to think I raised a monster." "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said calmly. "I'm doing it to protect myself." She laughed, sharp, bitter. "You think you're the victim, after everything I've done for you?" "You didn't do it for me," I replied. "You did it so you could remind me I owed you." There was a pause, a shift in breath. Then she shouted, "You've humiliated me. You've destroyed this family." I didn't respond. She went on, voice rising with every word. "You don't air dirty laundry, Marielle. You don't take your own mother to court. You're selfish. You're cold. You've turned your back on blood." And there it was again. Blood. Like biology excused behavior. Like the fact that we shared DNA meant she could cross any line and still expect my silence. "I'm not turning my back," I said, voice low. "I'm drawing a line." She hung up. Not long after, Brielle called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to know what she'd say. Her voice was already breaking. "I don't have anywhere to go, Marielle. I thought you understood. I thought you were different." "I do understand," I said. "But this isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting what's mine." "You're throwing us out." "No," I corrected. "You and Mom moved in without asking. You threw me out." She sobbed into the phone. "I just needed time." "I know. And Mom has a house. You're not homeless." She didn't reply. "You're just not welcome in mine anymore." There was silence on the line. Not the heavy kind. The stunned kind. Like she couldn't believe I'd said it. Like I'd finally spoken a language she didn't know I was capable of. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't apologize. For once, I didn't feel like I had to. After I hung up, I stood at the window and watched the wind move the bare branches outside. My heart wasn't steady, but it was strong. My hands were cold, but they weren't shaking anymore. For years, I thought love was measured by how much I could take, how quiet I could stay, how well I could play the role everyone handed me. But now I was starting to believe something else. Love could look like a locked door, like silence that wasn't shame, but safety, like a decision made not in anger, but in clarity. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this much. I had finally chosen myself, and I wasn't going back. They showed up at 9:07 a.m., just like the paperwork said they would. Two officers from the Bellingford Police Department stood on either side of my door. Neutral, polite, not unkind. One carried a clipboard. The other kept a hand near his belt, not out of threat, just habit. Delora arrived 10 minutes later, wearing her church coat, lips pressed into a tight line. Brielle trailed behind her, red-eyed, holding a box too large for her arms. They didn't knock. The officers did. "Ms. Vaughn," one said, "we're just here to observe and make sure everything goes smoothly. No need to open the door unless you're ready." I nodded. I had spent all morning rehearsing this. My hands still trembled on the knob. When I opened the door, my mother walked in like she owned the place. "You've taken this too far," she said, before even setting her purse down. I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, watching as Brielle quietly began stacking a few items into a tote. The sight of her made something tighten in my chest, but I didn't speak. Delora followed me, standing in the space that used to be mine, like it still belonged to her. "You really called the police on your own mother," she said bitterly. "After everything." "You didn't give me a choice," I said quietly. "There's always a choice. You could have come to me like an adult. You could have talked to us." "I did," I said. "You didn't listen," she scoffed. "You're throwing your own blood into the street." "No," I said. "I'm asking you to leave my home." Her voice dropped low. "We're family. You're going to regret this, Marielle. We are blood, and blood doesn't do this to each other." I looked at her then, fully. "I've spent most of my life believing that," I said. "That family meant always forgiving, always making room, always saying yes, no matter what it cost me." She stared back, unmoved. "But I've also spent most of my life regretting the things I didn't say," I continued. "The boundaries I didn't draw, the silence I swallowed just to keep peace that never included me." Delora's eyes narrowed. "You sound just like your father, always playing the martyr." I didn't flinch. "I'm not playing anything," I said. "I'm just being honest." Behind her, one of the officers cleared his throat lightly. "Ma'am," he said to my mother, "we're just here to ensure everything is packed. If you need extra time, we'll work with you. But it needs to be today." Delora didn't answer him. She looked at me one last time. "You'll regret this. Maybe not now, but someday." I exhaled. Steady. Measured. I've already spent enough years regretting not saying no. She turned and walked back to the living room. Brielle glanced at me as she carried out the second load. Her eyes were tired, her mouth tight. She didn't say anything, and I didn't stop her. It took a little over an hour. When the last box was gone, the officers nodded, thanked me for my time, and left. I stood in the doorway as they pulled away. The wind had picked up, sending brittle leaves scattering across the walkway. A neighbor across the street was raking their lawn. A dog barked in the distance. Everything felt so normal, it was almost surreal. I closed the door slowly, clicked the deadbolt into place. For a long moment, I just stood there. The silence was immense. No footsteps, no drawers opening, no voices behind my back. Just me, and this space. I sat down on the hardwood floor. The late afternoon sun streamed through the west-facing window, casting long golden stripes across the living room. Dust floated in the light like tiny reminders that time moves forward, whether we want it to or not. It was the same condo I'd bought 7 years ago. Same square footage, same creaky spot near the hallway closet. But somehow, it felt brand new. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought there'd be a breakdown, something messy, something cinematic. But what I felt wasn't grief. It was relief. A quiet, steady release. like air finally leaving lungs that had been holding too much for too long. I leaned my head back against the wall, let my eyes fall closed. I didn't know what would come next. Holidays would be different. Relationships would shift. The phone might go quiet, or ring with more blame. I had no illusions that things would go back to normal, but maybe that was the point. For the first time, this space was mine. Fully, freely, not borrowed, not shared, not negotiated. Just mine. And I knew, without a flicker of doubt, that I would never live the way I used to. It had been a week. The condo was still half empty. Corners where furniture used to be now held soft sunlight and dust. But it no longer felt vacant. Just breathing. Like the space itself had been waiting for me to come back to it. For real this time. I spent the first few days quietly, slowly. I wiped down shelves, rearranged what little remained. Hung a new photo in the hallway, just a print of a mountain I'd never climbed, but one that made me feel steady when I looked at it. I ordered a small table online, chose it carefully. Not expensive, but mine. There were no calls, no texts, no knocks at the door. My mother and Brielle went silent, an unfamiliar quiet after years of guilt-laced messages, surprise drop-ins, and holiday demands, and didn't chase the silence. I let it stand. There was peace in that, even if it came with an ache. I missed the idea of family more than the people themselves, but missing something doesn't mean you need it back. Sometimes it just means you're healing where it once lived. I heard from Aunt Lois through a forwarded email. Apparently, Delora and Brielle had moved to a town about 40 minutes away, sharing a small rental near a strip mall, according to a cousin who still talked to them. My mother was telling people she'd been kicked out by her ungrateful daughter, who thought she was better than everyone else now. That used to crush me. Now? It stung a little, but only because it was so predictable. She needed a version of the story that made her the victim. And if that meant I had to be the villain, so be it. Colette put it best when I told her over coffee one afternoon. "Some people will never understand," she said. "That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means they're not ready." That sentence gave me more peace than any apology I was still hoping to get. Over time, I found small pockets of connection again. Colette and I saw each other more. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we just sat in silence and shared a piece of cake. Her presence felt like soft music in the background, not demanding, but warm, familiar. She invited me to a women's group she helped run at the community center, a mix of women from all kinds of backgrounds. Some divorced, some widowed, some estranged from children or siblings. No one asked too many questions, but when someone spoke, everyone listened. There was something deeply healing about being in a room where no one needed me to explain myself. They just nodded, passed the tissue box, and let the space hold whatever needed to be said, or not said. That's where I realized something I had been circling around for weeks. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who makes space for your truth, without punishment, without rewriting it. One Sunday morning, not long after, I stood in my kitchen, barefoot, holding a mug of fresh coffee. The window was cracked open, and a soft spring breeze moved through the room. The smell of new blossoms drifted in with the light. I looked around at the condo. Still spare, still quiet. But I didn't see lack. I saw breathing room. The blank walls weren't waiting for me to fill them. They were finally offering me space to grow into. I whispered to myself, not to fill the silence, but to claim it. I don't need anyone's permission to live like this. Then I smiled, almost without meaning to. This is my home, and I'm the only one with the key. I didn't know what would happen next, what the holidays would look like, whether the silence would one day crack into something softer. But I knew this. I had made a choice, a clean one, and I would keep choosing it every day until it didn't feel brave anymore. Just normal, because sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is close the door that hurt you the most and never open it again. Not out of anger, but out of love. Love for the version of yourself you're still becoming, the one who finally gets to breathe. Sometimes choosing yourself doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence, with distance, with a little ache you carry while you learn how to breathe differently. But even then, it's worth it. Because peace that comes from truth is softer than peace that comes from pretending. Maybe you've been there too, standing at a door, wondering whether to close it for good. If you have, I hope you know this. You're not selfish for wanting something better. You're simply ready. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to have you with me for the next one. Let's keep walking this path, one real story at a time.